Welcome back, book nerds. On this episode of the podcast, I'll be speaking with ERIKA LEWIS, author of Kelcie, Murphy, and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts. ERIKA's book introduces readers to a new kind of magical school and a warrior who must decide which side of an epic battle her destiny will lie. The other world is at war. The Academy for the Unbreakable Arts trains warriors, and Kelcie Murphy, a foster child raised in the human world, is dying to attend. At this school, she'll learn how to fight with a sword and harness her hidden powers, and most importantly, finding out who her parents are and why they abandoned her in Boston Harbor 8 years ago. When Kelcie tests into the school, she learns that she's a saga, one of the most ancient beings in the Otherworld, and are also kin to the Otherworld's most infamous traitor. Let's get to it and learn more about ERIKA and her new book. All right, book nerds, I'm now speaking with ERIKA LEWIS. Thank you so much for joining us today on this podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if you'd please introduce yourself for us and tell us a little bit about your book.
Okay. My name is ERIKA LEWIS. I live in Los Angeles. This is, let's see, my first middle grade series, which is really exciting for me. I have been, I started out working in television. I guess I can tell you a little bit about all the way, if you want to go all the way back.
Yeah, just give us a brief synopsis of who you are, and then tell us about what the name of your book is, and tell us a little bit about it.
Perfect. I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia, and went to school in Nashville, Tennessee. I've always been somebody who's traveled a lot and moved around a lot. When I first got out of school, I started actually working in news at CNN, which taught me quickly I didn't have really the ability to deal with news every day. It was a real grinding kind of place. And although I love working there, I ended up moving out to Los Angeles, and working in scripted television out here for studios and networks, basically developing and overseeing their programming, basically learning story that way too, constantly reading. The job itself entailed pitching stuff to my bosses, whether things were right for our network, and then overseeing creatively as it moved forward. And then I hit a certain place in my life where I really wanted to tell my own stories. Writing was something I've always loved. I had written a few scripts, but I really wanted to write novels, and I really wanted to write in the kids space. So for the last, 10 years or so, I have been a working writer, so to speak. My first novel came out, Game of Shadows, in 2017. My first graphic novel came out right before that, The 49th Key. And since then I've been able to continually to work and publish, and now March 1st, my first middle grade series, which I am so incredibly stoked about. There's so much in my heart in this story. Kelcie Murphy and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts comes out, and it's the story of a 12-year-old girl who is a foster kid in Boston when we meet her. And when I say a foster kid, she's been through the utter ringer, and not so much because the foster kid system in Massachusetts is a horrible, miserable thing, but it's because her caseworker is not who he says he is, and has been torturing her for most of her existence in the human world. She was abandoned when she was 5 years old. She literally fell right into the bay there, and the soldiers from the naval officers on the Constitution dove in to save her. And she was then, immediately put into foster care. She doesn't have any real memories of who her parents are. She thinks that's mostly just because she was only 5. And who remembers anything from the time they were 5, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think most people probably don't really have memories until they're like, what, like 5 or 6, somewhere
Oh
around there.
yeah, and they're little memories, right? But
Yeah, like little snippets here and there, but no one's like, oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember my entire 3rd grade,
all of
3-year-old life or 4-year-old. Like no one does.
no one does. So she doesn't have, but she's pretty much draws a blank except for this one reoccurring nightmare she has, which is basically the night she was abandoned. So when we meet her, she's been very quickly moved back to Boston. And she is starting school after it's already been started, about a month late. And she's on a field trip to one of my favorite fun places to wander around, the Boston Museum of Art, Museum of Fine Arts, I should say. And there she is, of course, accosted by evil things from her real background and unleashes the greatest evil the other world has ever known. And in doing so, then gets a snippet of who her parents might be and realizes that this is her clue to figuring out who she is, and immediately chases after it and chases after that dream. And as she goes through, and I don't want to give away too much of the story.
No, we don't want any spoilers.
But as she goes through immediately, very quickly at the beginning of the story, into the other world, and ends up in the lands of summer, she ends up smack dab in the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, which is a military magic school run by an Irish legendary teacher goddess named Stahak, who is responsible for teaching most of Ireland's biggest heroes how to fight with martial arts and magical weapons.
That sounds awesome. Can I live that kind of life? Can I go here? Can I go to this school? This sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have Irish ancestry, so do I qualify?
You know what? Anybody can go. In fact, when you get there, there's all cultures represented. Actually, not cultures, I should say. There's a very diverse group. So you're welcome. I'm welcome. And we're all welcome to test. That doesn't mean you're going to get in. So unlike other schools, you don't get to just go to the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts.
Okay.
Just like in real Irish mythology at her Fortress of Shadows school in the past, you have to test to get in.
Gotcha. So I can't just go to the bus stop and get on the bus and go.
No letters coming for anybody. You have to show up and you have to have the right stuff to get in. So
can you tell us, you mentioned that obviously that there's magic involved in this book and a magical world. You said it's called the Other World. Can you tell us a little bit about this world that that you've created for the story?
Yeah, the idea of the other world with a capital O is something that exists in many mythologies, whether even Indian mythology. I mean, they use this catchphrase of the other world. And in Irish mythology, it was this place where supposedly the fairies left, and their gods and goddesses left through the fairy mounds into this other world. My version of it, of course, is very different than mythology, but
you've got to make it your own.
In my world, the other world, there's two parts of the other world. There's the lands of summer and the lands of winter, and these two continents have been at war for thousands of years, and they honestly, at this stage, I don't even think any of them know why they were originally at war. And the thing that is keeping them from literally destroying each other is this giant abyss that basically split their continent in two. And they basically use the human world as a go-between, because both sides, through the portal system, the travel system, without giving too much away, can get in and out of the human world. And then with the right branch, the right invitation from the other worlders, you can get into the other side, but you have to get in and out. So there's a lot of spy stuff, a lot of changelings, shapeshifters, that kind of thing. A lot of all different kinds of Irish and Celtic, all the way across. Really, I steal from all over European history. And
hey, it works for the story. Why not?
I grab pictures from all over and mix it all up. But that's what my other world is.
So there's obviously this other world and the human world, and are they? I mean, in a lot of other stories and TV shows, movies, books, whatnot, kind of like they're very separate. You've got the magic world and that knows about the human world, but the human world doesn't know about the magic world. Or is that the case for your book? Or are the humans, are they very much aware of the other world, but they can't go unless invite? Like, are they very separate, human versus other world, or like are they kind of connected and they know about each other?
They're not connected in a global sense. They are
Okay.
connected in the sense that there have been humans and can be humans invited into the other world, just like in all of the lore in Irish mythology. They, somebody, if you're given a silver branch, is what they called it, a silver bough, Bough, that's your invitation to be able to get into their part of the other world. And so it can be, and there are other worlders, summer folk and winter folk, as I call them, who call the human world their home because they, for different reasons, some of them have chosen to live there. Some of them are spies. Some of them have little networks of things that are passing back and forth. There's a particular teacher at the school who lives in France, and nobody can, and it's kind of funny because she has a French accent, which seems really funny to Kelcie at first, because she's kind of like, what are you doing here? But then you slowly realize that there are people who know about it, not necessarily big governments or some kind of like
Gotcha.
big motive like that. No.
Gotcha. And obviously there's a lot of mythology, especially, Celtic and mythology involved in this. Is that something that you've always been interested in, or did you have to do a lot of research about, European mythology and Celtic mythology and all that to incorporate the book?
Both. For me, it started when I was living in London during part of my university time towards the last 2 years, and spent most of my free time in Ireland and traveling around.
Lucky.
I fell in love with Ireland.
Oh, Ireland is on my top list of places to visit.
It's a magical place. The people are incredible. The landscape is beautiful, the greens, but really once you're there, you just it's hard to want to leave. And now COVID has been miserable because we haven't been back for the last 2 years, but we go all the time. But for this particular story, I was driving my kids nuts. I had finished Game of Shadows, and I was my editor said to me, we'd love for you to come up with a middle grade story. And I was so excited, and I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I wasn't entirely sure. So I dragged my family all the way through Scotland on this tour, and with a gazillion Outlander fans. And I'm one of them, don't get me wrong, huge Outlander fan, but it was hysterical because every place we went was an Outlander, like someplace they were shooting Outlander, that's a Leo. And it was like there was like, I don't know, 5 or 10, I guess there were 10 families, but they were mostly couples. We were the only ones with little kids, and my kids were way too young to even watch Outlander, let alone read it. And my husband hadn't read it, but I was like, what do you mean? This is Outlander. And I think the first season had just finished, and I had just finished watching it. But I needed to go to the Isle of Skye. And I had, in my time of studying Celtic mythology, which I did a lot of research for Game of Shadows, and I love to wander through graveyards, any kind of ruin, anything that feels like it's haunted and creepy. I want to know everything about it. It's just my personality and what I'm interested in. And so when I was in college, I did a lot of studying and wandering around through different things, and then went back and worked with a professor who was at Cambridge. She's now back at Berkeley, and another one who is over at Trinity. And they helped me go around to Ireland, to different places and see things. But I had not been to the Isle of Skye. And so I had this idea that I wanted to do something around this place called the Fortress of Shadows, which is Skyhawk's original school. So I was reading these legends of Cuchulainn and these different big heroes in Ireland, and all of them would talk about her as like this teacher. She was a mention in there. There were some stories about her, but not like full on, you know. She was always a mention as a part of teaching. Like if you were going to be a big hero, you had to have been taught by her. Mm-hmm. But her school was, you know, there was a real place to go to. The ruins were there. So I went to this place called Dunsky Castle, which translates to the Fortress of Shadows, which is named for her because her name translates to the shadowy one. And so she was sort of this mythical creature, this mythical woman. She had a test to get into her school. And the woman who was giving us the tour she was Scottish, and she had actually never heard of where I wanted to go. She was like, I don't know what this is. And I was like, well, just do me a favor. And I was like, I really need to go see this for my own work. If you could just, this is why I was taking the tour. So she looked it up the night. She's like, I didn't even know that was there. I was like, that's because you're Scottish and this is an Irish myth. And it was really interesting. So she was like, oh, we got to go. So we went over, and literally the Bridge of Leaping was still there. There's a big giant hole in the middle of it. And I was like, my daughter was trying to cross it. I was like, no, it's going to throw you off. You can't do that. You know, I was like having this, it was so funny. But the whole thing is still there. And it was just such great inspiration. And so I started to sort of break out, what would I do with this world, and what kind of kid did I wanted to tell about with this world? Because, you know, there are a lot of magic stories with kids, a lot of kids.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that was always intriguing to me was that a lot of these kids always felt so perfect. Mm-hmm. Not that that's a bad thing. You know, they were always the nicest kids. They were always the kids who were always doing everything right. I was like, well, what if you have a kid who isn't the perfect kid? You know what I mean? Even Darth Vader's kid, Luke Skywalker, is so perfect. He's just so nice to everybody.
And they excel, you know, it takes them sometimes a little bit. They're always like, oh, you excelled. It's like, you didn't really have that many problems. Like, you became the master pretty easily.
Exactly, right. And Kelcie is everything that is not that at all. Kelcie is like, she is a tough kid. She's been through torture with this situation. And when she gets there, she has some chips on her shoulder. She has trust issues. She never has been anywhere long enough to make friends stick. And she doesn't even know how to stick, you know, get them to stick around even, you know, she's just learning. She has to learn to trust, and she has to learn to open up, and has to learn to get past other kids, you know, bravado exteriors of, you know, especially in a school full of like athletes, you know, you got one who's like, I'm perfect, you know, and who ends up being, you know, her frenemy as she's sort of going through it. And then her best friend, Niall, when she first gets there and she first meets him, you know, he too is dealing with his own struggles because he was born with only one hand. And for him, that's not a handicap in any way. But for everyone looking at him, that's you know, at a school like this, especially, it's a real, you know, thing that comes up a lot, you know. So anyway, and Zephyr, the kid who ends up being the leader of their group, he's sort of the comic relief. So nobody takes him seriously, but he's in charge of their group. So he has to like overcome this. Okay, I can't be funny all the time. I can't be, you know what I mean? He's got to get to this place where he's, you know, earned their respect and pushing them the right way. So she's not perfect. And that's the story I wanted to tell, was this group of misfits who are at this school and have to, you know, and then her who's unleashed this evil, and it's kind of all her fault, has to go through this whole thing about, you know,
always blame the 12-year-old for the, you know, the evil being unleashed upon the world. It's always the 12-year-old's fault.
It was her fault, you know, but she doesn't end up being, you know, a lot of people like to call these stories the chosen one story. I think she's the antithesis of that. She's somebody who it's heaped upon, even when she finds out who her parents are, because it's not necessarily a good thing.
To say no spoilers, no spoilers.
No spoilers.
Whenever dealing with obviously creating a huge world and magic and all that and all these characters, from what I've spoken to other authors or and even screenwriters for movies and whatnot,
yeah,
it's always I've heard different ways of how authors keep track of all the different characters and where they are and how far it is from location A to location B and everything, and having to we had to go through here, and then we're like, oh crap, I forgot that the bridge is just been destroyed, and having to kind of keep remembering the map and what the world looks like and the characters and where they are. So what's your process for remembering and keeping everything straight?
Yeah, it's really hard when you've destroyed something and then you've forgotten you've destroyed that, and you're going back there and all of a sudden the landscape is beautiful again.
Yeah.
Which does happen. And I did have that experience. I'm working on book 2 right now. But I use all kinds of stuff. So the first thing I always do is draw a map. So whether it's the school map, because in the first book we're at the school, I draw the way the buildings look. I draw how far things. I draw I draw paths. I name the fields. I get so far down in the weeds because
that's good.
Yeah, well, then I can take the piece of paper and set it aside, and then as I'm writing the characters going through that, I can refer back, because you'll never remember all the names of the things that in your head, and then with the characters themselves, because it's a school setting, there are a lot of characters. It is what it is, and there's no way to have a school feel big without adding a couple of paragraphs when you're in a classroom about what the other kids are doing, and you got to drop names, you know what I mean? So
yeah, can't have a school with only 8 characters.
Right. So with me, I always felt it was really important to keep all of them. I keep flashcards. I keep a couple different things. I have flashcards because all these characters have otherworldly eye colors, and their appearances are all very different. And so I want to make sure that, and unless they're characters I go back to repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, I have to make sure I don't mix like somebody's eye color up, because some of them are cherry red and some of them are brilliant yellow, and so they don't have human eye colors. If one of them happens to be an ice fairy, and what color their hair changes when they get their ice armor on, whatever it is, those kinds of things I have to write down. So I keep flashcards for all those if they're not characters that are readily in my brain 24/7. And then when it comes to like the Fianas at the school, so when you get to the school, you get sorted is the wrong word. You get put into your den, who are people who have like powers to you. And those dens are delineated with, they use animals. So adders and cats and Sega, which so there's all different kinds of, there's 5 of them technically, I should say, different dens. But then each one of those, a person from each of those dens are in your fighting unit. Your SEAL Team 6 is called a Fianna. And so, your Fianna is when you get there, I had to write down all the different Fiannas and pair up all the first year class, because a lot to remember.
Sounds like a lot of prep work.
It's a lot of prep work. So I did all that. So I have my school book, which is everything that happens under the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts. And then I also have different things that I had to deal with, because there's another one of the groups, and I don't want to give away too much, but there's another language involved a little bit that's made up. So that also I have to keep track of all of that. So yeah, there's a lot, and thankfully I have my Starscape is so great, Tor is so great. They have somebody there who actually writes all this stuff down for me too, and sends me a list at the end of the edit, so that I have it to refer back to for book 2.
You got the Cliff Notes.
Cliff Notes version they send me. So
That sounds
yeah,
very helpful.
it's a lot of work. And actually in book 2 now we leave the school. So I had to map out all of the lands of summer and the lands of winter.
Even more world building. So obviously there's a lot of characters in this book. Whenever, your family or friends read the book, did you pull any inspiration from anyone for any of the particular characters?
Not necessarily the kids characters, the lead character, so to speak. There's a Kushi in there. There's a mythical creature that looks kind of like a dog, like a wolf with these feathering tails, and runs so fast it literally like leaves a trail, and his name is Striker, and he is very much like my golden retriever, who passed away actually like when I was writing this story. Striker is a lot like Sadie was in personality and temperament and loyalty and warmth. So I did steal my dog. And then the person who teaches combat training, Coach Blackwell, is a lot like my karate instructor from when I was a kid.
Okay.
Tough love.
So there are some similarities, some inspiration taken for some of the characters based on the real world people in your lives, but not necessarily the kids.
No, and not the not even any of the adults. They're all
okay.
Yeah.
It's just something it's always interesting to ask, because I know some people, some authors take descriptions and take the names and just change the names a little bit, and base characters off of family, friends, and stuff like that. So it's always interesting. Okay.
I have in the past. Mostly, people I didn't like so much came in and bullying for, but not so much in this book.
Gotcha. So when will this book be available? You said March 1st, correct?
March 1st. Yeah,
is it going to be available, I'm assuming, online, in bookstores? Where will people be able to find the book?
Everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Hit your indie bookstores up, please. Those are, I think Target, Walmart.
Okay, so anywhere books are sold and available.
Exactly.
Will there be an audiobook version of coming out in the near future? I mean, for someone like myself, I love listening to audiobooks.
I'm not sure whether I'm supposed to say this or not. I'm just going to say yes, they have, but it hasn't been announced yet. So yes, but I'm telling you.
All right, telling us when it's released. Hopefully the news has come out before the podcast does. But yes, if you're wondering, there will be.
There will be an audiobook, which is really exciting. But you guys are hearing it first, because they haven't actually announced that yet at Tor that I know of. But yes, it is happening.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, like I said, for me personally, I love listening to audiobooks when I'm, running or going for a bike ride, or while I'm working. Toss an audiobook on for an hour or two. You can get through a book in a week or two. So versus.
It's also so nice to listen to that instead of trying to constantly find music to listen to, because you get sick of a song after a while. And when I'm with you there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if any of our listeners want to learn more about you and some of your past works and what you're up to, do you have a website, social media accounts? Where can our listeners learn more about you and follow your work?
Yeah. My website is erikalewis.com. It's really easy. And on most social media, I'm at Erika Ely, ELY Lewis. My middle name's in the middle there. And that's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, although I'm not as good at doing TikTok. I'm trying to be better.
There's always another social media platform to learn.
So many. Well, it's not even the learning, it's just the time.
It is very time consuming. And also just for any of our listeners out there, it is Erika spelled ERIKA.
Yes, it's with a K.
Which I greatly appreciate because my name is Erik with a K.
Oh, yes. That's more Nordic, right?
Yes.
Swedish, yes.
Yeah, it's more it's ERIK.
Yes.
So
exactly. There you go. But yeah, I'm pretty responsive. So if somebody, has questions, they
gotcha. Or as I also like to tell everyone, it's spelt the proper way. So.
Yes. More interestingly, just different, I suppose. Yeah. I like having a K. Some people spell Erika ERICKA, which I think would be.
Well, there's ERIC, ERICK, and ERIK.
Right.
For me, and I've got the K. There's no C in mine. So.
There you go. We're like twins.
Exactly. I can relate. To it. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. It was awesome to meet you and talk to you about the book, and I'm super excited to get my hands on it at some point in the future. One of the great but also downsides to doing this podcast is I learn about get to talk to so many authors, and I keep adding so many books to my reading list.
Yeah.
And I can't get through them fast enough. So the stack just keeps getting taller and taller and taller, starting with one book and then 3. And now I'm like, got 8 or 10 books on the stack, and it just keeps getting taller and I can't go through it fast enough. So I'm like, it's awesome.
People were so much nicer when the pandemic started, and they were listening to you, and they were letting you do your thing. And so you could read for 4 or 5 hours a day and not get in trouble. Now you got to work.
Exactly. The world's back to to working. It's like, I don't have enough time to read all these books.
I know.
But it was fantastic to talk to you. Great. And I can't wait for it to come out. And I'm sure it's going to be I'm sure everyone's going to love it. So, but fingers crossed. All right. Well, thank you again and have a great day.
You too.
That's all for this episode. Tune in next time where we'll dive deep into another book and learn more about its author. Take care and thanks for listening. Any parting words for our listeners before we go, Erika?
Hi, this is Erika Lewis, author of Kelcie Murphy and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, and you're listening to JeanBookNerd.com.